Jerry Maguire is one of those movies that I'd seen in bits and pieces on TV over the last, 25, almost 30 years. And, then on YouTube later on. It's one of those movies that all of the famous lines, even if you've never seen it. Show me the money, you had me at hello, and you complete me from the same scene. Help me help you is another one. I mean, truly, Cameron Crowe would have won the Oscar screenplay if it wasn't for Fargo. But let me not get ahead of myself here. I will also be trying to make some sounds with this VHS tape. I thought it was fitting because Jerry Maguire is actually the best selling VHS tape of all time that was not produced by Disney or released by Disney. But I knew I was overdue to watch Jerry Maguire in its entirety, in one sitting, from beginning to end. I've always, I think that was loud. I've always been a fan of Tom Cruise movies. I sort of fall on that side of the Tom debate. If Tom Cruise is running in a movie, I'm going to like it. I do think that a Tom Cruise running movie is a genre. Let me know what you think of the VHS. But yeah, what better time to watch Jerry Maguire than during the holidays? I was actually already planning to post this video today. This should be coming out on December 13th. And then when I was looking into the movie, I actually saw that it was released in theaters on December 13th, 1996. So that was a cool coincidence. And I won't bury the lead here. I loved this movie, hands down. Maybe, definitely a top 5 movie that I've watched this year. I think this is going to become a classic for me. I might have to rewatch it every year around this time. So, Jerry Maguire, if you're not familiar with the movie, is about this sports agent. He's played by Tom Cruise, and he has a crisis of conscience, and one night, in the middle of the night, he writes this manifesto. He calls it a mission statement. That's a recurring gag in the movie, because everyone else calls it a memo. And so he's at this conference, middle of the night, he's in this cold sweat writing a big memo. And it's kind of tearing into the status quo of sports agenting. And the next morning, by the time he wakes up, everybody has read the mission statement. So he gets fired from his job. And he's sort of left with one client who's played by Cuba Gooding Jr. and one sort of staffer from the agency who's played by Renee Zellweger. I think this was like her breakout role. And so he sort of has to figure out how to make this new business, his own business, work. So maybe I should start by chatting about the sports aspect of the movie, since the VHS is eating my hair. Given the theme of this channel, I'm fascinated by the world of sports agenting. I love to read about it. Obviously this is a movie, so it might not be the most accurate depiction of the work, but it made for a really fun setup, for me at least. And actually the character of Jerry Maguire was, I won't say based on a real agent, but Cameron Crowe, while he was researching the screenplay, he did follow around a sports agent for I think 18 months by the name of Lee Steinberg. And Steinberg has agented for more recently Patrick Mahomes in the past. So he's legit. And actually, a former Green Bay Packers vice president had said, I have a quote here, his name is Andrew Brandt, and he said that the film accurately portrayed the cutthroat nature of the agent business, especially the length to which agents will go to retain or pilfer clients. It also captured the financial, emotional, and psychological investment that goes far beyond negotiating contracts. And Steinberg, the agent that Cameron Crowe sort of shadowed, he actually makes an appearance in the movie. There are a few cool cameos, quite a few, in the movie. I'm thinking of Al Michaels, Roy Firestone, Frank Gifford, Drew Bledsoe, Troy Aikman, Jim Irsay, isn't it? We talked about the Irsay clan, or the Irsay patriarch in a recent video. And it features real NFL teams too, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character plays for the Arizona Cardinals. And you see, logos. It's not the real roster, obviously, but throughout the movie, whenever they're at a conference or at, a draft or something like that, it's always the real teams, which just adds a nice touch of realism, I think. I wonder if that's a thing of the 90s, and maybe it's too expensive nowadays to use real trademarks, real intellectual property. And you can tell that Cameron Crowe is a real sports fan. There's this underlying conversation about the commercialization of sports, just in general. And it goes beyond just the sort of mission statement that Jerry Maguire writes at the beginning of the movie. And in many ways, the script shows the dichotomy between the love of the game and the business of sports. One scene that really stood out to me was towards the end of the movie, when Cuba Gooding Jr. gets knocked out for a second. And the broadcast cuts to an ad break. I think it's like a credit card commercial. And you have his family at home, his wife, his kid. And they can't see if he's okay, because they're watching the broadcast and they cut to commercial. And so there's the subtext of sort of taking the human element out of sport. When you've got to keep advertisers happy, you keep them happy. But then that also made me think about, remember when Christian Eriksen had his heart attack during the Euros? I'm unfortunately seeing, it feels like more and more of these moments on live broadcasts nowadays. And when Eriksen fell, that was, by the way, that was my sister's first time watching a soccer game. She was visiting and we had the game on, and so that'll stay with her for a while. But I remember the broadcasters being really severely criticized in the moment and then following that day for keeping the cameras sort of on Eriksen for longer than people were comfortable with. The conversation was when you realize this, how serious the situation is. It's inhumane to keep live cameras focused on that. I think we've come to understand that the respectful thing to do in these situations is to go to a wide shot of the stadium, or maybe even go to the studio, the broadcast team, where they can give live updates on the situation as they see it, while a game is suspended. Unfortunately, I don't really see that happening in North America. I think they would always just cut to commercial here, which is, I think, just as questionable with behavior, because again, it's like, I think it's shown perfectly in Jerry Maguire when he's passed out on the field, and then we cut to a happy credit card ad. It's tone deaf. But at the end of the day, I think that's what the movie is showing. That sport is losing its humanity in many ways. And that's a lot of what Cuba's character aims to show in the movie. I forget who it was. I think it was Roger Ebert who criticized Jerry Maguire for having too many subplots. But for me, it's the opposite. I feel like the movie is, filled out really nicely. I feel like every character and interaction has a purpose, and I think in that respect, to me, it's like a model screenplay. there's no wasted, well, in this case, tape. So maybe that's a good segue into my more general thoughts on the movie. So first of all, I was worried in the first 10 minutes of the movie because it gave me whiplash. It felt very chaotic. The setup of the movie is like a mini movie itself. It starts with the high-powered agent who all business, and then the kid flips him off in the hospital, and he has the dark night of the soul, and then he writes his mission statement, and then he walks into the hotel lobby, and I think this is not even 10 minutes into the movie, and he receives applause from all of his colleagues for the memo. And then the voiceover, Tom Cruise, says, I was 35. I'd started my life. In that moment, you feel like you just watched an entire movie. By the way, that memo was inspired by a memo that Jeffrey Katzenberg wrote in 1991 at Walt Disney. You can find it online. It's really interesting, especially 30 years later. I think he predicted a lot of where the film industry was going. But yeah, we kick off into what the movie is actually about. And like I said, I loved it so much, and I did not anticipate that. The characters are also well written and lovable. The moment we meet Renee Zellweger and her son on the plane, I just felt all warm and fuzzy inside. Soon after, we meet Regina King's character. She plays, I'm going to repeat that in case I have to mute the sound I made. Regina King's character. She plays Cuba Gooding Jr.'s wife. And I don't know, there's something about her that really resonated with me. I think I watched this movie at the right time in my life, just generally. I'm not just talking about Regina King's character, but just generally. I'm glad that it took this long because it was the right time. And even the nanny, or the au pair, as he likes to be called, he's, supposed to be likable but annoying character. He's put together brilliantly. Oh, and Tom Cruise gets to do his own stunts in this movie too, so I was happy for him. That moment where he sort of face plants into the office floor carpet. You can tell it was him, and I'm glad he had a moment in this one. But yeah, the whole movie just made me feel inspired and happy. One thing that surprised me was how, in the context of the movie, the show me the money scene is so much better than as a standalone. Because you're about 30 minutes into the movie at this point. And I think it really adds depth to Tom's and Cuba's characters. Like the VP of the Packers said, the quote that I mentioned earlier, it really shows sort of like the desperation and the ridiculousness of this agent's life. And again, I don't think I'd seen the first 30 minutes of Jerry Maguire sort of like uninterrupted and chronologically before. So whereas before, it was just, this famous movie scene that I appreciated for its cultural value. Well, now it's a scene that I really appreciate from a filmmaking point of view. And that's the thing about this movie, is that it has all these famous moments and lines, but they don't exist in a vacuum, right? Like, I think nowadays with a lot of movies, you can get the feeling that someone came up with an idea for a funny or impactful scene, and then they sort of just built a movie around it. But I guess that's not how things used to get done in the good old days. I'm repeating myself now, but this movie feels really complete. Maybe that's the best way to put it. You got that couch scene between Tom Cruise and the kid. That's really sweet. The acting is really very strong in this movie from everyone. It really sucks you in. It's really funny too. One line that I think deserves as much prestige as You Had Me at Hello is Tom Cruise saying, I want to get this right, he says, "I didn't shoplift the pootie. Alright, I shoplifted the pootie." 10-star movie right there. On a 5-star scale. But that makes me realize that maybe the couch scene isn't so sweet if Tom was in fact shoplifting the pootie. That's the thing about Tom Cruise, he's too darn charismatic. The last thing I'll say about the characters and the writing is that all of the character motivations in this movie are very believable. Like, when I thought, would Tom have done this? Would Renee have done this? I'm like, yeah, fair game. For that character in that situation, and this is what they would do. Like, the wedding came as a shock to me, which in retrospect really shouldn't have, because I had seen the You Had Me at Hello scene before, and in it Tom Cruise says something along the lines of like, "I came here to talk to my wife," or something like that. So I should have known. But you reflect on the timeline and the circumstances of the characters, and that is the answer for them. Cameron Crowe has been called the voice of a generation, and I can see that being the case. So yeah, Cameron Crowe, definitely someone whose filmography I need to dig into. Jerry Maguire was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Screenplay. And Cuba Gooding Jr. won for Best Supporting Actor. So if you haven't seen it, what are you waiting for? You can even watch it with someone who has zero interest in sports. Like, the romance is really good. And I'll end this video by saying that the movie ends on Bob Dylan's Shelter from the Storm, which I couldn't remember ever hearing before, but what a great song. And the soundtrack is filled with songs from like Dylan and McCartney and Springsteen, so great music by Nancy Wilson there. She deserves a shout out. Oh, and I haven't talked enough about Renee Zellweger in this video. She's a really strong actress, and I'm gaining appreciation for her these days. So I'm gonna go watch Bridget Jones' Diary right now. I'll see you soon.